It's about that time. Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. All right. So we'll be learning Maseches Beitzah Daf Yud test tonight. And we're starting 2/3 of the way down on Yud Ches Amid Beis at the two dots where it says V'shavin Shemashkin Es Hamayim. Even under the best of circumstances, I could never have prepared two blot today. So we're going to learn one blot tonight, Baruch Hashem, and we'll learn one blot tomorrow morning after the 6:20 Shachris. I imagine the other Arabs that we'll have between now and the end of Sukkot will also do the same thing if need be. We'll see. I understand. And I can't do it. I don't think I could swing it during the year because I have a Friday morning carpool. If I could switch that around, and I have a job.
Why can't you do a blot on Tuesday, Wednesday?
It's so hard to do a blot and a half on a work day.
Work day?
Yeah.
Tuesday, Wednesday, you should not be working. It's cloud.
I will tell Rabbi Howard. I'll let him know.
No, it's Yom Tov.
No, I'm just saying in general. No, it's too hard. It's too hard. It should be Daf Yomi anyways. So anyways, all right. Tonight's Daf Yomi is sponsored by Hirsch Chin. As with Akaras Tov to Kadosh Baruch Hu, that he got a clean bill of health tonight 6 years ago. Hashem should bless you with many more years of health. Health, happiness, and parnasa. Let's get started 2/3 of the way down Yud Ches Amid Beis. We learned in our Mishnah V'shavin Shemashkin Es Hamayim B'kli Even that let's say that the only fresh water that a person had to drink was inside this cup, but something fell into the water. Hey, we've been learning for 4 seconds. Something fell into the water, and now the water became tummy. So here's what the method is. So you take this cup of water with kosher water in it, with tummy water in it, and you submerge it in other water. And then once there's neshika, once the tahor water touches the tummy water from the mikvah, from the flowing water, then the water inside becomes tahor. So that was what the Mishnah was talking about. So it says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down, V'shavin Shemashkin Es Hamayim B'kli Even. But however, the Mishnah then said, but it's not true with matbilan. My aval lo matbilan. What did the Mishnah mean when it said that yes, we allow for hashaka, but no, we don't allow for matbilan? So Amar Shmuel, ein matbilan. Says lost the place here. Ein matbilan esakli al gav meimav l'taro b'yom tov. Says the Gemara, we were concerned about something else. So let's say again, this is my kli with tamei water in it. And I know that I have my method to make the water inside tahor by submerging the whole thing into a larger body of water that's tahor. And when the water from the outside touches the water from the inside, it's kosher. But I decide I'm also going to put the spoon in here to also be matar, an extra kli. So that's what Shmuel says in the Gemara is not allowed. That's what Shmuel says, that ein matbilan as kli al gav meimav l'taro b'yom tov. You can't add an extra kli in when you're doing hashaka. So then says the Gemara as follows: Moni mas nisin. Who is the author of our Mishnah? Lo Rabbanon, lo Rebbe, v'lo Rabbanon. It is neither of these two Tanoim, Rebbe and the Rabbanon. Why not? Because what we're dealing with is two features. We're dealing with hashaka, which is this form of making water inside of a vessel tahor, and we're dealing with tvila, which is being tovel kalim along with that process of hashaka. The problem is that this brisa, each of the shitas in this brisa, don't align with our Mishnah. The Tanya, 10 lines from the bottom on Yud Ches Amid Beis. In matbilan es hakeli al gav meimav l'taro. That is correct. That's what our Mishnah says. But the ein mashikin es hamayim, and also you can't do hashaka b'kli evan l'taro and divrei Rebbe. So Rebbe doesn't fit with our Mishnah because Rebbe doesn't agree with hashaka, but our Mishnah does. V'chachamim omrim matbilan kli al gav meimav l'taro. He doesn't agree with our Mishnah because he said that the hatbala is fine, but he also does agree that umashikin es hamayim b'kli evan l'taro. So each of them only in part hold like our Mishnah. So says the Gemara money. Which one would our Mishnah be like? Rebbe, if you want to say that our Mishnah is like the Shita of Rebbe, Kashya Hashaka, our Mishnah says that Hashaka is mutter. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says Hashaka is not mutter. So that doesn't work. And Rabbanan, 3 lines from the bottom, on Yud Ches Amid Beis, Rabbanan, if we are to hold like the opinion of the Rabbanan, then Kashya Hatbala, they disagree with the Hatbala. They say you can add an item to be toveled on top of the hashaka process. So the Gemara says that's not a good question. We could work out all of these shitas to fit with our Mishnah. Ibai Sema Rebbe and Ibai Sema Rabbanan. I could make our Mishnah and the Brisa work together within the world of Rebbe, and I could make our Mishnah and this Brisa work together according to the Rabbanan. Ibai Sema Rebbe. How could it be that I would work out How could it be that according to Rebbe I could work everything out? So it's very simple. The brisa that we just learned over here, Reisha de brisa b'Yom Tov, the beginning of the brisa agrees with our Mishnah, because he says you're not allowed to do hatbala. But v'seifa, when he says that you can't do hashaka, that's talking about Shabbos. The kulamas nitzin b'Yom Tov, and our Mishnah is all talking about Yom Tov. Therefore, our brisa aligns perfectly fine with our Mishnah within the camp of Rebbe. And at the very top of your Testament Aleph, Rabbanan, I could also say that our Mishnah aligns with the brisa within the camp of the Rabbanan. How so? Because v'kulamas nitzin b'Shabbos, our whole Mishnah was talking about Shabbos. It wasn't talking about Yom Tov, and the brisa is talking about Yom Tov, so they don't have to align. They don't have to be perfect because they're talking about different halachic sugyas. The Kitzur Nimratz, we had just learned a halacha in our Mishnah that on Yom Tov, two things were true. We learned that you're allowed to do hashaka, this process of ensuring that a liquid inside a vessel that was tamei can become tahor by submerging it in other waters. And we also learned that you cannot add a kli. And we're saying that's a din by yontif, and that is true both according to Rebbe and the Rabbanan. That brings us to the second line of your Testament Aleph, right after the two dots. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught us, Klisha nitma me'erev Yom Tov, if there is a vessel that became impure just before Yom Tov started, ein matbilan oso bein hashmashos. You're not allowed to do any tvila during bein hashmashos. What's the habamina to do tvila during bein hashmashos? It's already pashkia, because it's a din derabanan and it's bein hashmashos and there's a tzorach of the day. So maybe we could be mitzaref. That's what poskim refer to when you combine a bunch of factors together. If you ever talk to a posek in learning, you'll say like, is there a tzeruf? Can we add things together to get to the level of kula? It's bein hashmashos. We're only dealing with an isser derabanan. There's tzorech hachag. This is what you'll sometimes see by amir la'akum. It's for the sake of something chashuv. It's only din derabanan. That's that's what we would be doing here. So here we see that it should be allowed during bein hashmashos, but the Tana Kama says it's not allowed during bein hashmashos. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Omer, forget about bein hashmashos. Af b'chol in madbilan also. Even during the week, you can't do bein hashmashos. You can't be tovel during bein hashmashos. Now we have a practical problem in our mikvahos, is that our Kalim mikvah here, the one on Tui, is attached to the mikvah that women go to. So Pasha, you can't be anywhere in the vicinity. That's not appropriate to be there to be tovel anything during Bein Hashmashos. That's not right. Women are already arriving, and as we know in halacha, one is allowed to lie, just blatant lies. If somebody says to a woman where you're going and she's planning to go to the mikvah that night, I'm going to Target, I'm going to the best store, I'm going where, she can just straight up lie, like not even, no pretending, just lie, no problem at all. Obviously, that's a huge lack of tznius. As my Rebbe said when we were in Smicha, he said, there's no lack of tznius on knowing that a woman is a nida. Okay, it's not necessarily something you scream from the rooftops, but to know that a woman is going to the mikvah is a huge lack of tznius. It's totally inappropriate. So anyways, it's not practical by us. But anyways, the way that it's playing out here is that Rav Shimon Shazuri takes a very, very hard line. You can't take a kli into the mikvah during Bein Hashmashos ever. Forget about Yontif. Why? Says the Gemara, fourth line, Yud Testament Aleph, because when you have a kli that's tamei, what you need to do is two things. Yes, it needs to go to the mikvah, but after it goes to the mikvah, the sun has to set. It's called Herav Shemesh. And then the kli, it needs both requirements. It has to go to the mikvah. The kli has to be in the mikvah, submerged, and then the sun has to set. So says the Gemara, that's great for Rav Shimon Shazuri. The Tanakama lo boy Herav Shemesh. Doesn't the Tanakama agree that had it been that a kli was tamei, doesn't he agree that at the end of the day, we still need Herav Shemesh? So says the Gemara, Amar Rava. Rava says, Ashkachtinu l'Rabbanan de Rav de Yasfe. I walked into the Beis Medrash and a group of Talmidei Chachamim were sitting and talking about this sugya. The Ka'amre, and here's what they were saying about this machlokas between the Tanakama and Rav Shimon Shazuri in this brisa at the top of the Amud. The machshavto nikeres mitoch ma'asav kamiflage. The machlokas was whether or not we could get a glimpse into his thinking based on his actions. Let's see what the Gemara says here. 8th line. Vehechidami, what's the case that our brisa is talking about when a kli became tamei on Erev Yom Tov? Vehechidami, kigon denakit mana biyade v'rahit v'azil. It's 10 minutes before Shkia. You see a yid running down the street with a kli. Okay, he's running toward the mikvah. Says the Gemara, we take out the words bein hashmashos, and he's v'rahid v'azil atbula. He's going to run to the mikvah. Mar savar, according to one of the shitas in the brisa that we just saw, hay dekar rahid v'azil By virtue of the fact that I see he's running with the kli in the street, what do I know? That Jew knows that I have to get this to the mikvah before the sun sets, because I need both conditions to make the kli viable and usable for Yontif. It has to first go to the mikvah, and then the sun has to say he's running through the streets holding a cholent pot. So we know, this is one approach, we know what's going on in his head. We know that's why he's running. Umar Savar, but another shita says, no, he's running because he's late. He's just busy. We don't know what he's thinking. We have no idea if he knows the halachos of Herav Shemesh. And these are the shitas that are reflected in the Beitzah at the top of the page. That according to the Tanna Kama, who says you are not allowed to be tovel during Bein Hashmashos, we don't know that this guy knows anything about Herav Shemesh. And according to Shimon Shizuri, he probably does know about Herav Shemesh, because Rav Shimon Shizuri says that people do know about it. Yes.
What is there any significance that it uses the word Herav Shemesh instead of Shkias Achama?
Herav Shemesh is the phrase that's used for both people and for items that require tahara. That it's called Herav Shemesh in the Gemara throughout Shas. In Maseches Yoma we saw this. I'm sure in Shabbos. I'm sure in every Masechta, probably, maybe not Shkalim, but maybe even Shkalim. I don't know. That was also about the Beitzah Mikdash. It's just a phrase that's used to reference the Herav Shemesh, the sun setting, which then brings about the actual final part of the tahara. Now, this was the approach that they said in the Beis Medrash, but Rava didn't agree with them. The first of the very long lines on Yud Testament Aleph. Rava said, I said to them, I disagree with you. Everyone agrees. If you see the Jew running down the street, holding a cholent pot 10 minutes before Shkia, and he's running to the mikvah, of course he knows about the halach of Herav Shemesh. Otherwise, why is he running? What's the problem? He obviously knows the din. Kipligi, what is the machlokas between the Tanna Kama and Shimon Shizuri? Kigon de itme bepachos micha adasha, where the utensil that he's dealing with became quote unquote tameh with less than the lentil size of a sheretz. Now we know, because we've learned this before, that that's not enough to generate tuma. But the guy who owned this kli did not know the halacha. So it says the Gemara as follows. Mar Savar midehalo gamir, by virtue of the fact that he doesn't know that an adasha, less than an adasha, is not enough to generate tuma, we would also then assume that Herav Shemesh nami lo gamir, that he also is not holding in regards to the halachos of Herav Shemesh. Mar Savar, and the other sheets in the Beitzah holds hahu de lo gamir. We only assume that he doesn't know the halacha of which halacha about biche adasha, but ha'herav shemesh, that gamir that he does. So that's the machlokas, two different versions, those who were in the Beis Medrash and Rava who argued against them. And that brings us to the last two dots, 3 lines before the new Mishnah, 2/3 of the way down. On Yud Testament Aleph says the Gemara, matbilan migav lagav. If you would just look back quickly at the Mishnah at the bottom of Yud Zayin and Beis, you'll see these lines which were enigmatic. We had no idea what they were talking about at the time. The last line of the Mishnah on Yud Zayin and Beis says, matbilan migav lagav michabura lechabura. But we didn't give much explanation to it. Even Rashi says, B'Gemara mefarishla, and that is happening right now, Yud Testament Aleph, right before the new Mishnah. So what does it mean, migav lagav? Tanu Rabbanan. Kate said migav lagav. What does our Mishnah Yud Zayin and Beis mean when it says migav lagav? Says the Gemara. Harotze la'asos gito, a person toveld, and they made kosher all of their utensils for a gito, for a wine press, and then al gav kado, the kado al gav gito. Now he wants to switch to a kad, to an oil press, or he made it for his oil press and now he wants to switch them back to a wine press. He technically doesn't need to take them to the mikvah, but if he wants to, oseh. That's what the Mishnah says. And why is that allowed? Because he's not actually accomplishing anything. They technically don't need to be brought to the mikvah. So you want to go be machmer and tovel something on you, have a good time. You're not doing anything that's halachic. And what's Ketzad Michabura Lechabura? What does it mean that one is allowed to take something to the mikvah when changing chaburas? So says the Gemara, last line before the new Mishnah on Yutes, says the Gemara, you got your fork, you got your steak knife, you're ready to eat the Korban Pesach in one chabura, then you decide to change chaburas. Here too, if you want to go tovel everything, sei gesund. But it's not a requirement, it's a chumrah on your part. That's allowed, no problem. That's what our Mishnah was saying when we allowed migav lagav and michabura lechabura. That brings us to a new Mishnah, a little bit of a challenging Mishnah in Gemara, but we will certainly get through it. It says the Mishnah halfway down on Yud Testament Aleph, One is allowed to bring a korban shlamim. However, we are not allowed to do smicha. Let's first finish his shita, avalo olos, but you are not allowed to bring korbanos that are olos. So we need to see a couple of Rashis here. What's ve'ein somchin aleim? We know that smicha is one of the first machlokos we've ever had in Jewish literature. This machlokos Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. This is it. Right, correct. This is the first machlokes, our first lack of clarity with Sanhedrin. This is our first big machlokes that we had, was whether or not we do smicha on Yontif. What does Rashi say in regards to shitas Beis Shammai ve'ein somchin alein? So take a look at Rashi, 4/5 of the way down, right in the new Mishnah there, about 6-7 lines into the wide lines. Dibur hamaschil ve'ein somchin alein. Rashi says she'asmicha asura mishum shvus. There's an Isser D'Rabbanan to do smicha. Why is there an Isser D'Rabbanan to do smicha? To put all of your weight on the animal. He'd take his hands, put it on the head of the animal, and you lean down and really just bear down, put all of his weight on the animal. So says Rashi, you're not allowed to use animals. This touches on some of the shilas. A lot of shilas have come up. A lot of shilas have been asked Rabbi Robinson. How do people take care of dogs on Shabbos, take care of other animals that they own? These are all shilas that come from this din about being mishamish, about utilizing or even putting your weight down on Baalei Chaim. What? It's not carrying. There's just an Isser D'Rabbanan of tashmish of using an animal on and let's just finish up the Rashi. If it's not ein rochven al gabe behema, that's a sampling of that. You can't ride an animal. So there are shilas and poskim about how to navigate that in halacha. I think Rabbi Yashiv had a famous all D'Rabbanan, correct.
What would be the deraisa?
The only deraisa would be if you had an animal working your fields on Shabbos. That's a pasuk in Chumash. That's not allowed. But all of the other areas of involvement with animals on Shabbos, to my knowledge, by and large, would be derabanan. However, the Mishnah says in regards to Beis Shammai that you're allowed to bring a shlamim just without smicha, avalo olos, but you're not allowed to bring a korban ola. What does that mean? You're not allowed to bring a korban ola. What about the korban tamid? So take a look at Rashi, the Rashi right below where we are. Dibur hamaschil avalo olos ein mevian olos chutz mitmidin musafin shein korban tzibur v'zman kavua. Any korban ola that is a korban tzibur and zman kavua, that can be brought, and that's not what Beis Shammai is talking about. Beis Shammai was only talking about aval olas yachid lo yavi lefi she'ein bo achilas hedyot. He felt that when it came to a personal korban ola that you chose to bring, a neder, a nadava, whatever it was, that you're not allowed to do that, because if you did that, then you would be bringing an animal that you're not allowed to benefit from. Uksiv, the pasuk writes at the end of this Rashi, that when we do shchita for personal korbanos, it has to be one that you can eat from. That's shitas Beis Shammai in the Mishnah, and the Mishnah continues, second line of the Mishnah, halfway down New Testament Aleph, Beis Hillel Omrim, Mevi'in shlamim ve'olos v'somchen aleim. So he disagrees with him on both counts. You can bring an ola, and we also agree that you can do smicha. The Gemara opens with the statement of Ula. Ula tries to give a frame for what this machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is about. Amar Ula, machlokas b'shalnei chagiga lismoch. The machlokas is about animals that are brought as a shalnei chagiga, a shlamim that's brought to be eaten. It's a korban chagiga, and the smicha on that animal. The olas re'iyah likarev. And the olas re'iyah, which was a separate requirement, not really, it's tied to the day, but it's not a chiyuv it's not a chiyuv of the tzibur. It's not like a korban tamid. It's a korban that you have to bring because of the fact that you're doing aliyah l'regel. The Beis Shammai savri v'chagosem oso chag l'Hashem, that the pasuk writes we should celebrate chag l'Hashem chagiga in olas re'iyah. It has to be in the category of chagiga, and the ola is not in the category of chagiga. So he'll say that the korban chagiga is allowed, the shalnei chagiga is allowed, but the olas re'iyah is not.
When are you supposed to bring it during Chol Hamoed?
You can bring it beforehand or after. Yeah, you can bring it during Chol Hamoed. That's fine. You just can't bring it on Yontif. Beis Hillel Savrei LaHashem. The pasuk says the same pasuk. V'chagosem oso chag LaHashem. He says to Beis Shammai, look at the pasuk. It says LaHashem. Kol de LaHashem. Anything that is for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And because this korban is also for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's an olas re'iyah, you're still allowed to bring it even on Yontif. Beis Hillel's mekel. Aval, and this is an important line because this will carry the next amud of Gemara. Aval, says the Gemara, in the Darim and the Davos divrei hakol and krivim b'yom tov. And we will see here, this is a big machlokes in the Tanaim, that Ula's understanding of Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel concludes that when it comes to Nedarim and Nedavos, that they are not allowed to be brought on Yom Tov, Divrei HaKol. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Even Beis Hillel, who wants to be lenient, even he wants to be lenient, he won't be lenient when it comes to this. When it comes to Nadarim and Nadavos, that is considered not allowed. And in fact, he has some support. Ula has some support. But the Gemara is bothered by this because 2/3 of the way down, the Gemara says Ula's understanding of Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, which concludes that your voluntary korbanos are not allowed to be brought. That's not everyone's opinion. Meisvei, we have a brisa. Amar Reb Shimon ben Elazar, lo nechlaku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al ola she'ein shel yom tov, she'ein akreva b'yom tov. If you have let's say an olas yachid that you wanted to bring, everyone agrees that cannot be brought, different than our Mishnah. Ve'al shlamim she'ein shel yom tov she'kreven b'yom tov, and that shlamim, everyone agrees that can be brought. Al ma nechlaku, what is their machlokas about? So this is where we're going to see a difference between the shita of Ula and the shita of this brisa. So al ma nechlaku, 9 lines from the bottom, Yud Tesmet Aleph, al ola shehi shel yom tov, al shlamim she'ein shel yom tov. If you have an ola that's on yom tov and a shlamim that's not on yom tov, shebeis Shammai omrim lo yavi, Beis Hillel omrim yavi. Beis Hillel says if you have a shlamim that's not related to yom tov, you can still bring it. That's code word for Nadarim and Nadavos can be brought on yom tov. Now, Ula's understanding of Beis Hillel is that Nadarim and Nadavos cannot be brought on Yom Tov. But this brisa very clearly stipulates that if you have a korban shlamim that's not shaykh to Yom Tov, you made a commitment, Hashem, I'm going to bring you a shlamim if scenario X happens. Fine. But then this brisa means that Beis Hillel holds that you're allowed to bring voluntary korbanos. That's a big problem for Ula, because Ula's whole understanding of our Mishnah is that Beis Hillel was of the opinion that Nadarim and Nadavos cannot be brought. So how do we deal with this problem? The Gemara says, Taritz ve'emahachi, I can come up with an answer for you. And what we're going to do in short is reword this new brisa that we used as a question against Beis Hillel. Taritz ve'emahachi, here's what I would tell you. How do we reread that brisa? Amar Reb Shimon ben Elazar. We're gonna narrow the scope of the machlokas so that the conclusion is not like we had before. So what does the Gemara say? Lo nechlaku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al ola ushlamim, on both an ola and a shlamim she'ein shel yom tov she'ein kreven b'yom tov. We changed Beis Hillel's opinion to say that even he agrees that by a shlamim that's not specific to yom tov that it cannot be brought, and also ve'al shlamim she'ein shel yom tov she'kreven b'yom tov. And Beis Shammai Beis Hillel would agree about a shlamim that's shaykh to yom tov, the shalmei chagiga, they can be brought. Al ma nechlaku, only on one thing, al ola she'ein shel yom tov she'Beis Shammai omrim lo yavi, Beis Hillel omrim yavi. In other words, we restructure the Mishnah. We thought this Mishnah was teaching us, this brisa was teaching us a kasha on Ula. Ula had said that Divrei HaKol, Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, voluntary korbanos cannot be brought on Yom Tov. But then we saw this brisa that says it can. Says the Gemara, don't worry, I'm going to rewire the brisa. So says the Gemara, that's ridiculous. Rav Yosef Amar Tanoi Shaklas Me'alma. You're just making up a Tana out of nowhere. You're just going to rewrite this brisa. What is it? That's a lot of poetic license just to rewrite a brisa. Take a look at Rashi. Very, very important Rashi in understanding this question here. Second to the last line, Dibra Maschal Tanoi Shaklatz Me'alma. V'chi lo mishkachas Tana. There's no Tana in the world, the Amar Ku'ula, who holds like Ula, to say that Beis Hillel agrees that you are allowed to bring, that you are not allowed to bring a voluntary korbanos. Of course, we are able to do that. This gets into an academic integrity, Shiloh, when it comes to Mishnayos and Brisos. How much latitude do Amoraim and Tanaim have to reinterpret and to reword a Brisa? We do this all the time. No, listening X instead of Y. How does that work? They just get to decide whenever they want? No, it doesn't work that way. And what Rav Yosef is highlighting here is he's pushing back on this kind of this freedom of changing text. You can't just change a brisa. There has to be something very pressing that forces you to change a brisa. And in this case, says Rav Yosef, you missed the obvious. We have an open brisa that shows us that we have a clear machlokes in the Tanaim about whether or not voluntary korbanos can be brought. But you had no need and you had no right to reword this brisa. That's what Rav Yosef is bothered by. Tanoi shaklas me'alma, you just started to rewrite this brisa however you wanted. You don't even need to do that. Tanaihi. Whether or not you're allowed to bring a voluntary korban on Yom Tov is subject to a general machlokes in the Tanaim. How do we know this? Titania, the Beitzah writes 3 lines from the bottom of New Testament Aleph. Shlomim abayim machmas Yom Tov b'Yom Tov. If you have a korban shlomim that you'd like to bring on Yom Tov, and it is inherent to the Yom Tov, Beishamei omrim somech aleihem me'erev Yom Tov. You do the smicha before Yom Tov. We know why Beis Shammai says you can't do smicha on Yom Tov. He said that it was usher. It's an Isser D'Rabbanan. So fine, do it erev Yom Tov v'shochtan b'Yom Tov. But Uveis Hillel omrim somech aleim b'Yom Tov v'shochtan b'Yom Tov, and the smicha can be done even on Yom Tov. And now here's the line that Rav Yosef was really pushing for. Aval nedarim unedavos, but when it comes to nedarim and nedavos, divrei hakol ein craving b'Yom Tov. We see a brisa right here on the top of your Testament base that's exactly like the shita of Ula. You wanted to try and reinterpret, reword that brisa that we had on the bottom of your Testament Aleph? Absolutely not. We already have other valid brisos where we don't have to change the lingo in order to make it fit or not fit with Ula. You've taken it too far. And the academic integrity of brisos is critical. They're not in a book anywhere. The brisos that we have, they're scattered throughout Shas. We learn them just like we did right now. And Rav Yosef, again, this is a subtext. You want to change the brisa? You're not allowed. Because you missed the obvious. There's a brisa that already says exactly what you want to say. And the Gemara at the top of your Testament Aleph, at the end of that first line, concludes that in fact, Divrei Hakol and Craven B'Yom Tov, that Ula really does have a source in the Tanaim to support his Shita. And therefore, we have a general machlokes in the Tanaim. According to some of the Tanaim, it is perfectly permissible to bring a voluntary korban that is not Ula. That's the other approach. And according to Ula, that is not allowed. And each of them are rooted in the Tanaim. So it's a machlokes Tanaim that carries over into the Amoraim with no rewriting of the Brises. Says the Gemara on the top of your Testament base, second line. V'hani tanoi ki hani tanoi. And this machlokes is reflected in the following shitas. Titania, the brisa writes, we're going to see 3 shitas in this brisa, and then analyze all 3 shitas in this brisa, and then we're going to stop. This will take us down to the 4th line before the end of the page. Says the Gemara, what does the brisa say? Titania, Ein mevi'in toda b'chag hamatzos mipnei chametz sheba. The korban toda was 40 loaves of bread, 10 of which were chametz. And says the Gemara that you're not allowed to do that because you're not allowed to have chametz on Pesach. That should be obvious. That's halacha number 1 of shita number 1. Below be'atzeres mipnei shu yom tov. You also can't bring a korban toda on Yom Tov. That's why we don't say mizmor l'soda on as we go into those holidays, because you're not allowed to bring a korban toda on those days. That's where these halachos come from. You look in the Art Scroll Siddur, it says there you're not allowed to say it Erev Pesach. You're not allowed. Why don't we say it Erev Pesach? Because it's chametz. So you're not allowed to say it. Why don't we say it on Shavuos? Because you're not allowed to bring the korban on Yontif, because there's no reason to bring it on Yontif. It doesn't apply. So it says, maybe Adam but one is allowed to bring it on Sukkot. We'll analyze this in a couple minutes. That's Shita number 1 with its 3 parts. Shita number 2, Reb Shimon Omer, Hareyu Omer b'chag hamatzos u'b'chag hashvuos u'b'chag hasukos. The pasuk says all three of the holidays in one breath, and therefore, Kol sheba b'chag hamatzos, ba b'chag hashvuos u'b'chag hasukos. Any korban that is allowed to be brought on Chag HaMatzos, on Pesach, that will also be brought on the other holidays. Anything that cannot be brought on Chag HaMatzos, i.e. the Korban Toda, so here we have a machlokas in the Tanna Kama and Reb Shimon that the Tanna Kama allows this to be brought on Sukkot, but Reb Shimon says no. Our archetype is always going to be Pesach. And because we have a limiting factor by the Korban Toda on Pesach, which is that it's chametz, it can't be brought on any of the Gimel Regalim. Now, Rabbi Lazar, Reb Shimon Omer, maybe Adam Todas b'chag hasukos v'yotze b'yidei chovaso mishum simcha ve'en yotze ba mishum chagiga. You're allowed to bring it even on Sukkot. That sounds very similar to the Tanna Kama. We'll get back to this question momentarily. You are yotze the mitzvah of simcha, right? You're able to benefit from that in regards to this, to your mitzvah, the rice of simcha. But ve'en yotze ba mishum chagiga, but bringing a korban toda does not count as your korban chagiga. That has to be a different animal altogether. These are the 3 shitas. Let's analyze them. We're a quarter of the way down on your Testament base. Says the Gemara, Omar Mar. We had said in the beginning of this brisa at the top of your Testament base that the Tanna Kama was of the opinion that you're not allowed to bring the Korban Toda. You're not allowed to bring the Korban Toda on Pesach because chametz is a major component. Says the Gemara, this is like literally the ABCs of Passover. You could be the most unknowledgeable Jew in the world. You know you can't eat bread. You might still eat it, but you know you can't eat bread on Passover. It's like so obvious. So it says the Gemara, Pshita, Come on, like give us a little bit of credit. And answers the Gemara, Amar Rav Ada Bered Rav Yitzchak. No, you missed it. We're talking about the morning before the Isser Chametz kicks in. Can I bring the Korban Toda then? Says the Gemara, even though the Isser Chametz has yet to kick in, we still don't allow it. Why not? Because the reason why is because if you bring the Korban Toda, it won't reach its expiration date on its own. Why? Because the Isser Chametz will start in a couple hours. And because the Isser Chametz will start by, let's say, middle of the day on the 14th of Nisan, you cannot bring the Korban Toda that morning. Of course, you can't bring it on Pesach, obviously. That's not what the Gemara meant. The Gemara was saying you can't bring it on the morning of the 14th before the Zman Isser Chametz because it will become Asr on without its regular expiration date of Nosar. It'll become Asr simply because the clock expired on Chametz being Mutter. What did the Tanakama mean when he said "V'lo ba'atzeres mipnei shu yom tov"? Why? This is where we come back to our Mishnah a little bit. Because he held, like the Shita of Ula, that you are not allowed. It's backwards in time. Ula held like this Shita that you're not allowed to bring voluntary korbanos on Yom Tov. Aval maybe Adam Todaso b'chag Sukkos. According to this Shita, the Tanakama said you're allowed to bring the korban toda on Sukkos. Why? That doesn't make sense. Amos, when is this? If you want to say that the korban toda is being brought mamish on yontif on sukkis, you just said that by Shavuos you can't bring it because it's on yontif mamish. It must be b'chulo shel moed that on sukkis the korban toda is brought during chol hamoed. It's just not brought on Yontif itself. And the second sheet of the Mishnah that we had seen of the Bryce at the top of the page, we had said, Reb Shimon Omer, Harehu Omer v'chag hamatzos v'chag hashvuos v'chag hasukos. The pasuk seems to lump all three of them together, and therefore, Kol sheba b'chag hamatzos ba b'chag hashvuos v'chag hasukos. Any korban that's brought on chag hamatzos, we're looking at the model of Pesach. Whatever can happen there can happen by the others. Kol shelo ba b'chag hamatzos, the korban toda, which cannot be brought on chag hamatzos because of its chametz. So hold on 1 second. You're saying you can't bring the korban toda on Sukkos. Hashda salute misaltinan. You're allowed to break wood and throw it into the fire, but nedarmu nedavos miboya. Come on, that's ridiculous. So says the Gemara, Amar Abai ba'akrava kule al malo pligi b'shari. Everyone agrees that you can bring the korbanos of nedarim and nedavos. Namely, this is the shita that voluntary korbanos can be brought on Yom Tov. So we see the two machlokos, the two shitas that we saw earlier on the previous Amud, we see them playing out in this brisa. That's why on the second line of this page, it said V'hani tanoi ki hani tanoi, that we saw two shitas in the Tanaim, whether or not one is allowed to bring voluntary korbanos, and we're seeing them play out here. So it says the Gemara, Amar Abai, 2/3 of the way down, everyone agrees you can bring the korbanos. Let's say that a person brought upon themselves a chiyuv to bring a korban, a voluntary requirement. So says the Gemara, if you don't bring it by a certain time, you will have violated the isra of Baal Ta'acher. You missed your window of bringing the korban, right? So my driver's license sticker, I forgot to get it. I got ticketed like 2 or 3 times. Did you know this? I didn't even know this. After a certain point in the year, you cannot go to the DMV to get your sticker. I mean, you can't go to the currency exchange to get your sticker. Then they force you to go to the DMV. You've lost your opportunity, literally over zmano butler korbano. So says the Gemara, let's say that you take upon yourself a voluntary korban. So then you might violate the isra of Baal Ta'acher. Well, what's the machlokas? Tanakama savar shalosh regalim amarachman. What is your window of time to bring a voluntary korban? It's all 3 regalim, afilu shelo kesidran, even if they are not in order. Normally, the order is Nisan is the first of the Jewish year, not from a Rosh Hashanah perspective, but from Korbanos it is. So there we would say Pesach is first. What? Right, exactly, right. It's exactly as the pasuk lists them. But here the Tanakhama doesn't look at it that way. He says any 3 regalim, that will work just fine for you to. That's your expiration date. So let's say Shavuos is not the first. Right? That Shavuos is the second one. But let's say 2 days before Shavuos, a person says, Hare Alai, I'm going to accept upon myself to bring a Korban X. So then the Gemara says, Shavuos, Sukkot, Pesach, it's Mr. Deraisa. You were mevatel your mitzvah to bring this Korban. Reb Shimon Savar, this is the machlokas in our brisa, Kisidran in, Shalo Kisidran lo. Oh, this is beautiful. He says you may have up to 5 of the shalosh regalim, because let's say right after Pesach, you say, I'm going to bring a voluntary korban. So great. but we don't start to count until Pesach. So you can go through Shavuos and you can go through Sukkot. And Pesach is number 1, and then Shavuos is number 2. You have up until that next Sukkot, you have up to, but not including the 5th of the regalim. So he says that's how we would define lo te'acher. Rabbi Lazar, Reb Shimon Omer, what's the third shita? Maybe Adam Todasa v'Chag HaSukkos. He says you bring the korban on Chag HaSukkos. Amos, when is this brought? Says the Gemara, Ilema b'chulo shel moed. If you want to say that one is allowed to bring the korban toda on chol hamoed, well, then that's the same shita as the Tanakama. We saw that already. Hainu Tanakama, and therefore says the Gemara, it can't be al Yom Tov. It must be that Rabbi Lazar, Reb Shimon's of the opinion that you can bring this korban on Yom Tov because Savra Nadar Nadav is craven by Yom Tov, and he holds against Ula and that class of Tanaim. He says that you are allowed to bring voluntary korbanos. Why is it that the pasuk spoke? Why is it that the pasuk that was already talking about Sukkos, why did it list Sukkos again? We were already talking about Sukkos. That's what the whole parsha was about. And then we listed Sukkos again, says the Gemara. Rabbi Lazar, Reb Shimon L'Taimei. The Tanya, what does the Beitzah say? Reb Shimon Omer, Lo Yomar Chag HaSukkos, Shabbat Kasum Nedaber. The pasuk was already talking about Sukkos. Why? Lama Nemar. Why did you bother saying Chag HaSukkos? We're already talking about it. Just talk about the other 2 regalim. Says the Gemara, Lomar Shezeh Acharon. To teach you that this is the last one. The last one. What does that mean? It means that the order is Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. The Sukkot is the last one. And that's why the Pasuk in Chumash listed it even seemingly unnecessarily. 5 lines from the bottom. And with this, we're going to conclude. Rabbi Lazar, Reb Shimon Omer, Lomar Shezeh HaGorem. That this is the one that causes the problem. Wow, what does that mean? So take a look at Rashi, Shezeh HaGorem, 3 lines from the bottom. Dibur HaMaschal Shezeh HaGorem at the end of the line. As Bal Te'acher, She'afilu Nodar Lifnei HaChag, Kevan She'avar Lag Chag HaSukkos over. This is the most strict shita of all. That if a person makes a commitment to bring a korban, they don't have Shalosh Regalim for the Isra Bal Te'acher. They have up to the upcoming regel, whatever it is. So now there's 3 shitas. One of them says you have any 3 regalim in any order. The other said, which means you have 3, right? Up to 3. The second shita says only in order, which means you can have them in theory up to 5. And this last shita is the most extreme, Zehagorim, that the reason why the pasuk spoke about Chag HaSukkos and explicated that unnecessarily was to teach us that the Isra Bal Te'acher can apply even with only the one and upcoming holiday that is upon us. We'll stop right here and pick up after Shachris tomorrow. Wishing you all a beautiful night.